Today's student is not equipped to answer those questions because they've never been faced with the serious intellectual challenge of thinking through an argument they don't like. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees the freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, and petition. But what does that mean for us? It means that we, beyond certain examples, are able to speak freely without persecution from our government. We've had these freedoms since the year 1776. While the application of the amendment has evolved with societal changes and the expansion of technology, we have still retained the core freedoms provided by it. We should not take the First Amendment for granted. What are our duties as Americans to promote the greater good with regard to the First Amendment? Also, could the amendment that we rely on be detrimental to us at times? How can we protect our freedom of speech? As Americans, we strive for equal rights for all. Throughout our country's history, the First Amendment has been used to solve countless societal problems. An example of this is women's suffrage. For generations, women were oppressed, not having the rights that their male counterparts gained at birth. However, the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848 changed this forever. This was a convention to discuss the social, civil, and religious rights of women. Inside the Wesleyan Chapel on July 19th and 20th, both women and men assembled, and the first wave of feminism began. From there, women slowly began to gain more social and political power in the United States. In the year 1919, they finally won the suffrage for which they had fought so hard. This is just one example of how the freedom of speech has fundamentally bettered the lives of an oppressed group in the United States. We have a civic duty to uphold the virtues granted by the First Amendment and speak out when we see a problem in our society. Many people believe that it is our responsibility to keep the world safe for democracy, and the freedom of speech is an obvious way to fight for others. Recently, Hong Kong has been in the news due to the Fugitive Offenders and Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters legislation bill. This was proposed by the Chinese government and would allow for the extradition of Hong Kong and Taiwanese people back to the Chinese mainland for trial, where the laws and rights are different. Protesters of the law claimed that it would silence critics of the government and expose those extradited to torture by the Communist Chinese government. The Hong Kong Journalist Association was quoted saying, the new law would not only threaten the safety of Hong Kong journalists, but also have a chilling effect on the freedom of expression in Hong Kong. On October 4th, Daryl Morey, the general manager of the Houston Rockets, used social media to show support for the people of Hong Kong. The Chinese Basketball Association immediately announced that it would no longer cooperate with the Houston Rockets, which prompted several responses. Chinese broadcasters announced that they would not show NBA games. Several NBA players tried to distance themselves from Morey's comments, saying he did not speak for the NBA. The NBA apologized for Morey's remarks. Several Nike stores in China removed Houston Rockets gear from their stores, and many people seem to have chosen money over supporting the people of Hong Kong. Democratic Representative Tom Malinowski tweeted, and the NBA, which correctly has no problem with players or employees criticizing our government, is now apologizing for criticizing the Chinese government. This is shameful and cannot stand. Former NBA star Shaquille O'Neal supported him, saying, one of our best values here is the freedom of speech. We're allowed to say what we want to say, and we're allowed to speak up when we see a problem in our country. And that's just how it goes. Freedom of speech allows Americans to stand up against what we think is wrong. As the governmental response to the Hong Kong protests is growing increasingly violent, the protests have expanded into a fight against police brutality and China's infringements. On November 27th, our United States President, Donald Trump, signed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Bill to show support for the pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. The Chinese government from there, ban U.S. military visits to Hong Kong. Even though the First Amendment has been used to solve countless societal problems in the past, in recent years it has become the subject of heavy debate. While there are many examples of the limitation of the First Amendment, one of the most prevalent examples of this limitation is the rise of areas known as safe spaces in the United States. Merriam-Webster defines a safe space as an area intended to be free of bias, conflict, criticism, or potentially threatening actions, ideas, or conversations. These areas are most abundant on college campuses. An example of this is Oberlin's College in 2016. On the campus, a portion of the African American student body called for a segregated African American safe space. This would be an area where only African Americans could go to avoid racial discrimination. Ironically, this self-segregation is creating the exact problem it's meant to solve. By preventing a person from going to a certain area based solely on their race, they're racially discriminating against a group. This, at its core, is a fundamentally horrible idea because it destroys dialogue and has devolved into a mess of offended people desperately hiding from any opposing opinion. If we censor the bad ideas, we risk missing the good ones. Former professor at the University of Chicago, Jerry Coyne, expressed his concern about this sheltering of negativity, saying, "Holocaust denialism was the evidence of the gas chambers, was the evidence that 6 million Jews disappeared. Today's student is not equipped to answer those questions because they've never been faced with the serious intellectual challenge of thinking through an argument they don't like. Students need to hear the best case for these loathsome views in order to properly counter-argue." In 2017, students at Fordham University were kicked out of a safe space cafe for wearing their pro-Trump Make America Great Again hats. This cafe has rules against assuming one's gender, sexuality, race, class, or experience, yet finds supporting our president too offensive to accept. In addition to limiting communication, safe spaces are also adding fuel to the fire by allowing students to go through school free of dissent and negativity. The problem with the sheltering of dissent is that shelter breeds sensitivity. Just like when you cut your skin, the layer of skin beneath is more sensitive because it's been sheltered by the skin above, causing all contact with the area to hurt. It is the same with the emotions of students using these safe spaces. Being sheltered from any opposing opinion, they'll be totally unprepared when they go into the real world, which doesn't care about their feelings. Dialogue is the one true force that can solve any problem in the world. War, hunger, even global climate change could be solved through dialogue. So what can we do to ensure that we protect these freedoms? To quote theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, "For millions of years, mankind lived just like the animals. But then, something happened, which unleashed the power of our imagination. We learned to talk and we learned to listen. Mankind's greatest achievements have come about by talking, and its greatest failures by not talking. All we need to do is make sure we keep talking." Thank you.